Story 1. The smell of fresh coffee filled the kitchen as I arranged Claire's favorite croissants on a plate. I wanted her birthday to be perfect this year, a gesture of love and gratitude for everything she meant to me. The past few months had been a whirlwind, with Claire working longer hours and coming home distant and preoccupied. I chalked it up to stress and decided to ease her burden with a dream vacation. I had been secretly planning it for weeks, carefully hiding every detail so I could surprise her at dinner tonight. The idea of seeing her face light up kept me going. After all, wasn't that what love was? Doing everything to make your partner happy. But as I finalized the last-minute details, I stumbled upon something that turned my world upside down. I was on Claire's laptop, trying to find her passport details to book the final leg of the trip. That's when I noticed the email. At first, I didn't think much of it, a message from Adam R. But the subject line stopped me cold, "Can't wait to celebrate together." My stomach tightened. I hesitated but clicked on it. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. Looking forward to our special night. I've booked the suite at the Bellflower Hotel. The champagne will be waiting. Love you. Adam wasn't just a colleague. He was someone Claire had been seeing behind my back. And their special night? It was tonight, her birthday. I closed the laptop, my hands shaking. My mind raced through 1,000 thoughts. This couldn't be real. Claire wouldn't do this to me. To us. I wanted to believe there was some innocent explanation, but deep down, I knew the truth. The rest of the day passed in a haze. I pretended everything was fine, even when Claire came home and gave me a distracted kiss on the cheek. She was all smiles as she told me she'd be meeting a client later in the evening but promised to make it back in time for our dinner reservation. I nodded, biting back the urge to confront her right there. Not yet. If she thought I was clueless, she'd slip up. By the time we arrived at the restaurant that evening, my chest felt like it was about to explode. The small Italian place was dimly lit, intimate, the kind of spot where you'd expect romantic confessions, not the unraveling of a marriage. Claire looked stunning in the dress I'd bought her last year. She smiled warmly as we sat down, completely oblivious to what was coming. So, I began, my voice calm but tinged with an edge I couldn't hide. "Did you have a good day?" "Oh, busy as always," she replied, reaching for her glass of wine. "But I'm glad we could do this tonight. It's been a while since we've had time just for us." I nodded, the irony of her words making my stomach churn. That's true. It has been a while. Our food arrived, but I could barely touch mine. She seemed to notice my unease and leaned in, her brow furrowed. "Is something wrong?" I stared at her for a moment, then placed my fork down deliberately. "Actually, yes, Claire. Something is wrong." I pulled out my phone and slid it across the table, the email from Adam open for her to see. "Care to explain this?" Her face went pale. For a moment, she was speechless. Then, she laughed nervously. "Sam, this isn't what it looks like." "Really?" I said, my voice sharp. "Because it looks like you've been planning to spend your birthday in a hotel suite with another man." She opened her mouth, probably to spin some excuse, but I wasn't in the mood to hear it. "Don't lie to me, Claire. Just tell me the truth." Tears welled up in her eyes, but they didn't move me. "I didn't mean for this to happen," she whispered. "It was just. I've been so unhappy. I didn't know how to tell you." "Unhappy?" I repeated, my voice rising. "You were too unhappy to talk to me, but not too unhappy to sneak around with someone else. Do you have any idea how humiliating this is?" The other diners were beginning to notice. Claire shrank back, her tears flowing freely now. "I'm sorry," she sobbed. "It was a mistake. I never wanted to hurt you." Hurt didn't even begin to describe it. Sitting across from the woman I thought I knew, I felt every emotion, anger, sadness, betrayal, crash over me like a tidal wave. This was the person I'd built my life around, the one I had sacrificed for, loved unconditionally. And she had thrown it all away. I stood up, the chair scraping loudly against the floor. "You've made your choices, Claire. Now you'll have to live with them." "Sam, wait, please," she pleaded, but I walked out, leaving her sitting alone in that perfect little restaurant where I'd planned to give her the trip of a lifetime. That night, I checked into a small apartment I'd rented on impulse after discovering the email. I spent hours staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment of our relationship in my mind. The signs were there, her distance, the late nights, the excuses. I just hadn't wanted to see them. The next morning, I called a lawyer and started divorce proceedings. But I made a decision, I wouldn't go public with what she had done. This wasn't about revenge. It was about reclaiming my life and dignity. Let her explain to her friends and family why our marriage ended. I wasn't going to stoop to her level. Looking back, I realize Claire's betrayal taught me something invaluable: love should never come at the cost of your self-respect. I gave her everything, but in the end, she took me for granted. Walking away was the hardest thing I've ever done, but it was also the most liberating. So, what would you have done in my place? Would you have exposed her to everyone or kept it private like I did? Part of me wonders if I let her off too easily. But one thing's for sure, I won't make the same mistake twice. Story 2. Emily had always been a meticulous woman. She cared about appearances, from the way she dressed to the way she maintained our home. It was one of the many things I loved about her, her attention to detail. But over the past few months, something had changed. She was spending more time on her hair, wearing makeup every day, and picking out outfits that looked more suited for a fashion show than an office. When I asked about it, she brushed it off with a smile. "You know how competitive things are at work," she said. "First impressions matter, and I just want to make sure I look professional." It sounded reasonable at the time, but there was something in her tone that didn't sit right with me. Maybe it was the way she avoided eye contact or how quickly she changed the subject. Still, I pushed the doubts aside. I was working extra hours to save for our kids' college accounts, and I told myself that her changes were just part of her evolving career. But deep down, I knew something was off. The call came on a Thursday night, just as I was finishing up some emails for work. "Hi, this is Lisa from Emily's office," the voice chirped. "I was just calling to let her know I'll be late for the team dinner tonight." "Can you let her know?" I frowned. Team dinner? Emily didn't mention a dinner tonight. Lisa hesitated. "Oh, I assumed you knew. She's at La Forza with Greg from marketing. They've been working late on the Harper project together." My stomach dropped. Emily hadn't mentioned Greg or a dinner, and the way Lisa said his name set off alarm bells. After I hung up, I checked our shared phone account. Sure enough, there were dozens of late-night calls to Greg's number, calls that lasted far longer than any professional discussion should. My mind raced. Was this just a work friendship that had gone too far, or was it something more? I decided I needed to see for myself. The restaurant was bustling when I arrived, but it didn't take long to find her. Emily and Greg were seated at a corner table, leaning in close, their heads practically touching as they laughed over a bottle of wine. It wasn't the body language of colleagues, it was something far more intimate. I felt a mix of anger and heartbreak rising in my chest, but I kept my composure as I approached their table. "Emily," I said, my voice calm but firm. Her head whipped around, her face draining of color. "John. What are you doing here?" "I could ask you the same thing," I said, keeping my tone even. I turned to Greg, whose smug smile faltered under my glare. "And you must be Greg. Nice to finally meet the man my wife spends so much time with." Emily scrambled to her feet, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. "John, it's not what it looks like," she stammered. "We were just discussing work." I gestured to the wine and the candles on the table. Really? Because this doesn't look like a work meeting to me. Greg stood up, trying to defuse the situation. Hey, man, let's not make a scene. It's not what you think. I turned back to Emily. I want the truth. Right here, right now. No more lies. She hesitated, her eyes darting between me and Greg. It's just, we've been close lately, but it's nothing physical. I swear. Greg's expression betrayed her, his eyes widening for a split second before he looked away. That was all I needed to see. Save it, I said, my voice sharp. I've seen enough. The drive home was silent. Emily tried to speak a few times, but I cut her off. I didn't want to hear her excuses or apologies. The betrayal was too raw, too fresh. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat on the couch, staring at old photos of us on my phone, our wedding day, the kids' birthdays, vacations where we looked so happy. It felt like another life, one that had been ripped away by her lies. The next morning, I called a lawyer. If Emily thought I was going to let her destroy our family without consequences, she was wrong. I spent the next week gathering evidence. The phone records, screenshots of their texts, even photos from the restaurant. I wasn't just protecting myself, I was protecting our kids. Emily had jeopardized their future, and I wasn't going to let her drag them down with her. Once I had everything I needed, I made another call, to her boss. I wasn't looking for revenge, but I wanted him to know the truth. Emily had blurred the line between her personal and professional life, and it wasn't fair to the company. Her boss thanked me for the information, and by the end of the week, Emily was placed on probation. When I served her the divorce papers, she broke down in tears. John, please, she begged. We can fix this. I made a mistake, but it doesn't have to end like this. I shook my head, my voice steady despite the lump in my throat. You didn't just make a mistake, Emily. You made a choice. Over and over again. And now we have to live with the consequences. The divorce was finalized a few months later. I kept the house and full custody of the kids, ensuring they had the stability they needed. Emily moved into a small apartment across town, her relationship with Greg fizzling out soon after. Looking back, I still feel the sting of her betrayal, but I've also found a sense of peace. My kids are my focus now, and I'm rebuilding my life one step at a time. But sometimes, I wonder, was I too harsh? Should I have handled things differently? Or was exposing her the justice she deserved? What would you have done? Would you have let her go quietly or made sure everyone knew the truth? Story 3. Sarah's hand slipped into mine as we checked into the retreat, her smile looking forced but hopeful. This is going to be good for us, she said, her voice softer than usual. I nodded, trying to believe it. 10 years of marriage had brought us to this moment, a couple's retreat in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by pine trees and promises of rekindled love. Things hadn't been easy between us lately. We argued more than we laughed, and intimacy felt like a distant memory. I was determined to fix things, though. Sarah was the love of my life, the woman I'd built everything around. Whatever walls we had put up, I wanted to tear them down. The lodge was picturesque, with cozy rooms and large windows overlooking a pristine lake. It felt like a place where healing could happen. Or so I thought. That evening, after a long day of group sessions, Sarah excused herself to the room, claiming she was tired. I lingered in the lounge, chatting with another couple, Jim and Louise, about the struggles of balancing work and marriage. When I returned to our room, I heard Sarah's voice through the partially closed door. I know, she was saying, her tone hushed but urgent. I feel trapped, Adam. I don't know how to end this without hurting him. I froze. My heart pounded as the pieces clicked into place. Trapped? And this? Who the hell was Adam? Quietly, I pulled out my phone and hit record, capturing her side of the conversation. "It's not that simple," she continued. "He's trying so hard, and I don't want to be the bad guy. But I can't keep living like this." The betrayal hit me like a physical blow. She wasn't just unhappy, she was confiding in someone else. Someone who wasn't me. The next morning, I sat across from Sarah during breakfast, barely touching my food. She chatted lightly, as if nothing had happened, her laughter cutting through me like a knife. I nodded along, pretending to listen, but my mind was racing. During our afternoon group session, the counselor asked each couple to share what they hoped to achieve from the retreat. Jim and Louise spoke about wanting to communicate better, and another couple mentioned trust issues. Then it was our turn. "I'd like to share something," I said, my voice calm but firm. Sarah turned to me, her expression wary. Reaching into my pocket, I pulled out my phone. "Last night, I overheard something that I think needs to be addressed." Her eyes widened as I hit play. The room filled with the sound of her voice, confessing to Adam about feeling trapped and unsure how to leave me. Gasps echoed around the room as Sarah's face turned pale. "Mark," she stammered, "how could you? How could I?" I interrupted, my voice shaking. "How could you, Sarah? How could you talk to someone else about ending our marriage while we're here trying to save it?" The counselor tried to intervene. "Mark, maybe we should." "No," I said, cutting her off. "This is the truth, and I'm done pretending everything is fine." Sarah sat frozen, her eyes darting between me and the others in the room. The silence was deafening. That night, I packed my bags and left. I didn't need more sessions or empty apologies. I needed distance, clarity, and a plan for what came next. When I got home, I called a locksmith and a lawyer. Sarah's betrayal was clear, and I wasn't going to let her twist the narrative. By the time she returned from the retreat, she found herself locked out and served with divorce papers. Sitting alone in the house, I felt a strange mix of emotions. Shame, for airing our dirty laundry in front of strangers. Satisfaction, for finally confronting her lies. And sadness, for the love I had lost. Looking back, I wonder if I should have handled it differently. Should I have confronted her in private, saved her the humiliation? Or was exposing her the only way to ensure the truth came out? Story 4. Lily was the kind of woman who could light up a room. I remember the first time I saw her, laughing at some joke across a crowded bar, and thinking, I have to know her. Fast forward 10 years, and she was still beautiful, still captivating, but lately, she felt distant. She'd been working late for months, claiming deadlines and client demands were keeping her at the office. I tried not to take it personally. After all, everyone has tough seasons at work. But as our anniversary approached, I hoped to remind her of everything we'd built together. I spent weeks planning an elaborate evening, dinner at the place where we'd had our first date, followed by a surprise trip to a bed and breakfast in the mountains. I even bought her a bracelet she'd admired in a store window, carefully hiding it until the big day. But Lily didn't seem excited. When I asked about her schedule, she mumbled something about an important project and said she'd try to make time for dinner. That night, as I sat alone in our living room, I started to wonder, was it work? Or was it something else? The first red flag came 2 days before our anniversary. While checking our joint account to make sure I had enough to cover the trip, I noticed a string of charges for expensive dinners and a jewelry store I didn't recognize. Confused, I clicked through the receipts. A necklace, a pair of earrings, and meals at restaurants Lily and I had never visited together. My stomach twisted. Was she planning a surprise for me? Or were these for someone else? I needed to know. Using the GPS app we'd installed on our phones to keep track of each other during business trips, I saw her location, the Grand Meridian Hotel. My heart sank. What reason could she possibly have to be at a hotel at 10 p.m. on a Wednesday? I told myself there had to be an explanation. Maybe she was meeting a client. Maybe the charges were part of a work event. But deep down, I already knew the truth. Our anniversary arrived, and I stuck to my plan. I dressed in my best suit, packed the bracelet, and drove to the Grand Meridian. On the way, I stopped at a liquor store and picked up a bottle of champagne, the final touch for the confrontation I was dreading. The hotel lobby was bustling when I arrived. I asked the receptionist for Lily's room, flashing my ID as proof of my connection to her. She hesitated but eventually gave me the room number. When I knocked, I heard muffled voices, then the sound of footsteps. The door opened, and there she was, wrapped in a robe. Her eyes widened in shock when she saw me. "Nate," she stammered. "What are you doing here?" I held up the champagne. I thought I'd surprise my wife on our anniversary. Before she could respond, a man stepped into view, shirtless and smirking. He was tall, fit, and at least 10 years younger than me. "Who's this?" he asked casually. "I'm her husband," I said, my voice steady despite the storm raging inside me. I stepped past Lily and placed the champagne on the table. "Happy anniversary, sweetheart. Looks like you're already celebrating." Lily's face turned red, and she started to speak, but I cut her off. "No need to explain. I think I get the picture." I turned to the man. "Do you know it's our anniversary today? 10 years of marriage. I'm guessing you weren't invited to the party." He glanced at Lily, his smirk fading. "I didn't know." "Save it," I said, my voice sharp. "You can both go now. This celebration is over." Lily grabbed my arm as the man hurriedly gathered his things. "Nate, please, let me explain." "No," I said, pulling away. "You've said enough." After they left, I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the champagne. The adrenaline that had carried me through the confrontation was gone, replaced by an overwhelming wave of grief. I thought about the years we'd spent together, the laughter, the dreams, the promises. And now, it all felt like a lie. The next morning, I contacted a lawyer and filed for divorce. Using the hotel receipt and GPS records, I ensured the settlement would be in my favor. I wasn't interested in revenge, I just wanted to protect myself and move on. Lily tried to reach out, leaving tearful voicemails and sending long emails, but I didn't respond. Her betrayal had severed something that couldn't be repaired. Looking back, I still wonder if I handled things the right way. Confronting her in the moment felt cathartic, but should I have waited? Given her a chance to explain before throwing her out? What would you have done? Would you have exposed her on the spot, or handled it more privately? Either way, one thing's for sure, I'm done ignoring my instincts. Story 5. The house smelled of cinnamon and pine as I carried the last box of decorations into the living room. Our kids, Ella and Jake, were busy hanging ornaments on the tree while Jessica, my wife of 12 years, strung lights along the banister. Christmas had always been my favorite time of year, a season of magic, family, and love. This year felt different, though. Jessica had been working late more often, her phone glued to her hand when she was home. I told myself she was just stressed about finding the perfect gifts for the kids. After all, money had been tight lately, and Jessica was always generous to a fault. I didn't question it. Why would I? We'd built a life together, and I trusted her completely. But on Christmas Eve, my faith in her, and in our marriage, came crashing down. That night, after the kids were in bed, I went to the garage to grab the last few presents I had hidden there. When I came back inside, Jessica's purse was on the kitchen counter, its contents spilling out. As I went to tidy it up, something caught my eye, a second phone. I frowned. Jessica had never mentioned having another phone. Curiosity got the better of me, and I unlocked it, using her birthday as the passcode. What I found shattered me. There were messages from someone named M, filled with explicit photos and descriptions of things they'd done together, things Jessica and I hadn't done in years. My hands shook as I scrolled through their exchanges, each message another dagger to my heart. She had been lying to me, sneaking around while I worked overtime and planned our family's Christmas. I stared at the screen, torn between rage and heartbreak. By the time Jessica came downstairs, I had put the phone back in her purse and forced myself to smile. She kissed me on the cheek, oblivious to the storm brewing inside me. "Everything ready for tomorrow?" she asked, her tone light and cheerful. "Yeah," I said, my voice steady. "It's going to be a Christmas we'll never forget." She laughed, completely unaware of what I meant. The next morning, the kids woke us up at the crack of dawn, bouncing on our bed with excitement. I plastered on a smile as we made our way to the living room, where the tree sparkled with lights and gifts spilled across the floor. Jessica handed out presents, her smile radiant as the kids tore into their packages. For a moment, I almost forgot what I'd discovered. Almost. When it was my turn, I reached under the tree and pulled out a small box wrapped in silver paper. "This one's for you, Jess," I said, my voice calm. She looked surprised. "For me? What is it?" "Open it and see." Inside the box was a manila envelope. Confused, she opened it and pulled out the printouts I'd made of her messages with M. Her smile froze. Her eyes widened as she flipped through the pages, her face draining of color. "Merry Christmas," I said, my tone colder than I intended. "Eric, she started, but I cut her off. "Not here. Not now." I glanced at the kids, who were too busy playing with their new toys to notice the tension between us. "We'll talk later." Jessica nodded, stuffing the envelope back into the box. Her hands trembled as she placed it under the tree, forcing a smile when Ella called her over to help with a toy. The rest of the day passed in a blur. I kept up the facade for the kids, laughing and joking as if everything was fine. Inside, though, I was falling apart. That night, after the kids were asleep, Jessica and I sat down in the living room. The twinkling lights on the tree felt like a cruel contrast to the conversation we were about to have. "How long?" I asked, my voice low but steady. Tears streamed down her face. "A few months," she admitted. "It didn't mean anything, Eric. I swear." "Don't," I said sharply. "Don't insult me by pretending it didn't mean anything. You lied to me, to our family. You risked everything we built for what? For him." She broke down, sobbing into her hands. I felt no sympathy. "I'm not doing this now," I said, standing up. "We'll get through the holidays for the kids, but after that, we're done." "Eric, please," she begged. "We can fix this. I love you." I laughed bitterly. "If you loved me, you wouldn't have done this." The next few days were excruciating. Jessica tried to act normal, but I could barely look at her. Every smile, every laugh felt like a lie. The day after New Year's, I filed for divorce. I used the evidence I'd collected to ensure a favorable settlement, securing custody of the kids and the house. Jessica moved into a small apartment across town. I didn't tell the kids the details, only that we both loved them and would always be there for them. Looking back, I wonder if I handled it the right way. Should I have waited to confront her privately? Or was the public reveal during Christmas morning the wake-up call she needed? I'd like to think I did what was best for my kids, even if it meant swallowing my pride for a few extra days. But what would you have done? Would you have exposed her right then and there or kept it a secret for the sake of your family? Sometimes, the hardest lessons come wrapped in the unlikeliest packages. For me, that package came on Christmas morning.